So thank everyone for coming. This is another edition of the CDSS Exchange. The CDSS Exchange is a monthly speaker series, guest speaker series that we try to do here at CDSS. Really having guest speakers from agency or also external organizations whose work impacts a lot of the work done here at CDSS. The idea is to give everyone a real comprehensive view of all that their work impacts and all that's being impacted by it. In the spirit of that, this month we have guests from the California Youth Connection who are going to give a talk and discussion about some of the real life impacts and outcomes associated with child welfare here in California. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa, and I'm the Director of Policy for California Youth Connection. I've been with the organization for about 5 years, and prior to that, I was actually a member of the organization. So folks have kind of seen me grow up at CYC, and it's really unique and interesting, and it keeps me very humble all the time because we have people on staff that remember me when I was a very rowdy 19-year-old. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us and the webinar as well. We felt really excited to come and connect with you all, and then also kind of shed light on a really important topic that Department of Social Services overseas. So with me, I brought my amazing team, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves. And if you just say your name, your role, and anything else you'd like to add. Go.
You can turn okay, does this work? Okay, it works. Hi, everyone. My name is Zahra Martinez. I am the training coordinator for California Youth Connection and the Youth Training Project. I have been a part of CYC for about 13 years in different capacities. A member, a former board member, now staff, and then doing regional coordinator work, and then now on the training team and working with the awesome and amazing policy team. And so, yeah, that's a little about me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan Sosa. I'm the statewide policy coordinator for California Youth Connection, which means that I support the Legislative and Policy Committee, the body of our organization, which are members that work on our legislative issues to advocate for bills that we're sponsoring and assist them on any policy implementation. Was a former member of CYC as well from the Orange County chapter, was active for 4 years before taking this role as a coordinator. A fun fact about me is I'm the oldest of 7 siblings. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and yeah, looking forward to spend time with them.
Hi, my name is Christina Parker. I'm the statewide policy coordinator, also a former member as well from the San Bernardino chapter, and I'm happy to be here as well.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share really real quickly about the work we do, and then we'll go ahead and jump in. CYC is a youth-led organization, so we put young people impacted by the foster care system front and center, and even more so, we put them in the decision-making seat. So I think the work we do is really unique and special because these young people have grown up in a system that has told them where they can live, told them where they can go to school, and told them who they can and cannot see. So at CYC, I really think of it as we give power back and we give agency back in a really unique policy-driven community organizing way. So we have about 30 chapters across the state, starting from Humboldt all the way down to San Diego. And the chapters are also a youth-led model, and so they get to determine what would they like to work on from a community lens. So sometimes it's creating awareness and doing walks and stuff like that. In other chapters and counties, they're collating resources for the local youth and working with 211 to update those resources so it's relevant to a young person experiencing foster care. Working with young people in foster care is really dynamic, and there's never a dull day, to say the least. But also, Another, I guess, pillar of our organization is that we operate from a positive youth development frame. So we work from an asset-based model where we see their light and potential the second they walk into the door. And we don't put them in a situation where they have to earn our trust or earn anything. They have a little bit of interest, we will foster that, right? We will help provide exposure and opportunities for them to explore that further. This is the policy and training team. So our role is very specific to legislative or regulatory work and direct training. And I would say the cornerstone of our work is community organizing. That is at the heart. So that's a little bit about the organization. Today's presentation is really unique and a little bit different. As you see, the team before you, we all have lived experience in the child welfare system. That's another piece of the organization is we hire from within in as much as we can. And so it's actually really rare for us as staff to also share from our own perspectives. So we're going to kind of bridge that a little bit of reflecting about our experiences in growing up in foster care. And then also as professionals in this work, how do we navigate this system? So really excited for that topic. That being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the first question, and we'll all take maybe a few moments to just answer it. The first question is, can you share one memory you have from being in foster care, or the moment, if you have that memory, of when you realized you were in foster care?
Yeah, I entered foster care through kinship. And so me realizing that I was a foster youth was a little bit different than others may have. I remember 3 instances where I kind of knew something was different, but I didn't understand that there was a terminology or name to it. When I was 8, I remember my grandmother and my auntie fighting over who would get custody when she passed away. And I remember my grandmother saying, "Oh, you just want her for her money." And as a kid, I was like, "Wait, what? Why do you get money from me?" So it was like that was the first moment I kind of knew that something was different. Around I think 6 or I don't remember what age I was, but I remember going to my school and everyone asking why I didn't have a mom or a dad. And I knew something was different, and I was very sad at that age. I didn't understand. I couldn't find a reason to why I was different than all of my other peers. And it wasn't until college when I was called a foster youth and understood the terminology around it that I understood that my experiences growing up actually had a name to it.
Thank you, Christina.
I'll say the first memory going into care or recognizing I was into care, one very vividly was just in the 4th grade. So entered a care around 9 years old. From there, I was separated from my siblings. So really not knowing how was the situation. I was placed in Los Angeles County. So I remember just waiting in the office. Don't know how was the process, if they were like calling my aunts, uncles, cousins, any external family. Didn't know what foster home was, adoption. But I was excited to go. You know, there was abuse, neglect, and that I was facing in the situation. So I was really happy, like going to a foster home and sleeping on a bed, interacting with other youth my age. But I remember in 4th grade, you know, I wasn't going to school for a long time. I wasn't in school for like about a year. So going in, it was like adapting to just like, I remember grabbing a pencil, reading a book, and my teacher's like, all right, if you want to introduce yourself, like, you know, say a little fun fact about the class. And I didn't know what to say. I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about, you know, what's going on at home. But at the same time, this is all new. So I remember I was like, hey, my name is Jordan. I'm 9 years old and I'm a foster youth. And everybody was just like, what? But yeah, just it's always changed ever since. Like, you know, I did move to multiple foster homes, so it was really a different dynamic. Sometimes I did feel like a child, sometimes I feel like an asset. Like, you know, I learned real quick that there was paychecks coming for my stay, as well as the politics and the different relationship and the power structure between social workers, attorneys, judges, and what my bio family wanted within my case.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hi, everyone. So when I was thinking about the question of a memory from care, when I realized that I was in care, I guess, in my lifetime, I was placed in care at two major developmental pieces, or I guess places in my life. When I was a toddler, when I was about 3 or 4, and was in care for quite some time. And I was far too young at that time to understand what was happening. I just knew I was being shoved into a car, taken away from my family, and then later on reunified with them. And it's still, at that time, I didn't understand it until much later, so much later when I was a teenager. Then the second time I was placed in care, I actually made the call myself. I was about going on my 14th birthday, realized that my situation was unhealthy and it wasn't going to get any better. And so I realized, also having my younger sisters, that this was what I was setting them up for, that I was the oldest in the house, and that if I stayed there, this is what eventually, when I moved out at 18, they were going to have to live through it. So I grabbed the phone, ran to the corner, called the police, and told them that my situation wasn't healthy, and that they either needed to come pick us up or I was taking them, and I don't know if it was going to be safe. And so we were eventually placed into care that same night. They put me in care, and I remember staying in the county office, and then that next day being reunified with my sisters and seeing them crying and them asking where my mom was and my stepdad, and understanding that I made that choice, that I called, and then us being placed in care. It really hit me, the decision that I had made, but then the following months afterwards, understanding that that was the best decision I could have made for us.
Thank you, Zara. For a few of the memories that I have in care are a little bit foggy. I entered care when I was 4 years old, and my younger brother was 2. So we would hear stories, and I would kind of replay it. So I still am a little confused which ones are true memories or which ones are story play. But anyways, I remember being so young, having a social worker come visit me in my home every month and going to court was normal. I didn't know that wasn't normal until we had other foster kids come in and out of the home. And after seeing some of my siblings leave and other siblings come, I started to ask a few more questions. And I remember at one point, one of my sisters, Anika, when she first came, she was probably 13 and I was 8. And she said, none of us took the time to learn her name, and we called her the new girl, because that's how frequently people were coming in and out of our home. And I still always apologize to her, and she's like, oh, it's okay. It's fine. And at that point she had experienced a lot of placement changes. So when I say my siblings, I only have one biological sibling that I'm connected to. The rest are my foster brothers and sisters. And we were able to develop and grow a really beautiful bond that is very unique and unlike anything else. But it's still my family at the end of the day. One specific memory where I realized my experience was different than other people was when a social worker came to my school for the monthly visit. I think I was in 4th grade or 5th grade, and I got called up to the nurse's office. So when I went and I saw her, and then I came back, the other students asked if I had lice. And so in that moment, I hesitated, and I had to pick which was worse, having this stranger come check on me or having lice. I was like, how do I want to play this? I decided to just talk about my social worker at the end of the day, but I just remember that moment of these are both very weird options. And so that was kind of my experience. Okay, jumping into the next question. We all have very different experiences in the child welfare system. Some of us have talked about kinship care, long-term foster care, reunification, re-entry into care. So probably between the 4 of us, we've almost touched every quarter of the system. If you had a magic wand and you had one wish for the system based on your own experiences or the work you do, what would it be and why?
if I had a magic wand, is to put additional resources to social capital and mentorships. That was something that really helped me through my time in care and transitioning out of foster care. Specifically, going through multiple placement changes, even having the connection and relationship with my family was pretty hard. That was already its own battle between social workers and court cases and any other individuals that were involved. So really, I had to look towards my mentors and my community that supported me. A lot of them were current and former foster youth that were aging out, my foster brothers and sisters, as well as organizations like California Youth Connection. I found CYC when I was going through my second year in college, and that was another time that I re-examined what does it mean to be a foster youth. Similar to Christina, I didn't know the resources that were available. I didn't know what AB 12 was, extended foster care, what IOP coordinators or THP plus programs. It was really like, I'm about to be homeless. Is there something available for this? I can't pay my tuition. Is there any, scholarship available? And I remember my first year in college, I was at the dorm, and I remember the dorm office was like knocking on my door. It's like, hey, if you're being late of your payments, you're not going to live here, as well as we're going to put a hold on your classes. So I was like, I need to find some resources now, or I'm just going to drop out of school. And in care, I knew education was the biggest opportunity for me to set a new foundation. My parents, one barrier they face is due to their undocumentation status, they couldn't qualify for a lot of resources. They were pretty much trying to live under the grid. And with that, I knew to set a foundation and a future for my brothers and sisters, it was going to be through educational opportunity. And I couldn't find that support through my bio family. So mentorship is a huge thing. My last placement, my foster father was a huge mentor and support for me. Even though he couldn't help me much during my college career, just letting him know that, he was taking care of my brothers, having connection, promoting, being that advocate for me, whether it was in the court, through my family visits, or just letting me know how my siblings were doing was very, very important to me. And that's something I see that is very lacking in child welfare. A lot of the relationships that are dependent is by a set of child welfare professionals. If I depended all my resources to my social worker or to a child welfare professional, I wouldn't really get far or know the guidance. So mentorship was a huge support for me through my time in care.
Thank you, Jordan.
If I had a magic wand, I would change the culture and the verbiage that is used. I think one thing that I always hear is trauma sensitive. Is your agency trauma sensitive? And I think that we'd have to change the verbiage to trauma reduction, trauma healers, trauma, some form of word that has action to it, and the reduction of trauma, providing age-appropriate skills to deal with trauma, providing resources that are untraditional therapeutic opportunities for the youth to be able to deal with their trauma. I think that as in colleges and being prepared to work in this field, that trauma sensitivity or trauma, being aware of trauma should be taught in colleges and not dwelled on outside of college. And so I would love to see a shift from trauma informed or trauma sensitive to a platform of trauma reduction, trauma healers that has a very motivation behind it to begin to do this work, because we know that trauma exists. So how do we reduce trauma? How do we help these youth who are having behavioral issues that is a reflection from the traumas and experiences that they had while they were in care? I would like for more youth to, if I had a magic wand, more youth would be at the table, and they'll be there as child welfare experts, not just foster youth, shifting from us, shifting from a nature of identifying individuals who are at the table as foster youth based off of the identity that they were unable to choose, but more focused on their knowledge and their expertise and the brilliance that they bring to the table and new perspective that they also bring. So just really shifting the verbiage and the culture would be my one if I had a magic wand.
Thank you, Christina. So something we do in CYC land is we snap in solidarity. So if you see me snapping, that's what it is. You're welcome to partake and join if you hear something that just really resonates with you. That's what that is. Zara, did you want to answer?
Yeah, I think what I would want to change is knowledge, importance, and sensitivity around cultural background for youth and also their identity, right? I feel like our youth go into resource homes or foster homes where they're facing situations where they have to compromise their beliefs, they have to compromise what it is that they need, hygiene-wise, food. Like they're not in households that speak their mother tongue. They're not in settings where folks are empowering them for their identity, and instead thinking about if you're in this family, right, in some settings, like be a part of this family, go to our church, speak our language, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, eat our food, and not enough of like, what are you comfortable with? What can we go to the store and buy you so that feels like home to you? How can we set up ways for you to see your family if that's healthy, so you feel connected to your culture? But also the process of how we recruit resource parents, right? That it's not on Craigslist ads, it's not on a flyer that's hanging on the corner or a small billboard, box billboard that's on the corner. I think when I was in care, that was the hardest thing for me, was when I was walking around my neighborhood, when I was walking around the neighborhood and seeing these posts that were like, do you want to be a foster parent? Do you want to make extra money? And it was like, what? Like, you're going to be a resource parent and you're being sold by the idea of money, not by helping youth and really investing in young people who do not have their families or do not have the resources around them to take care of them to get them to adulthood, right? And so I feel like those are the two things that I feel I would immediately change right now with the wand.
Thank you, Zara.
Mm-hmm.
As for my magic wand, there's a lot of parallels or connection to the work that Youth Law Center is doing at QPI, and their whole model is based on foster parents and investing in parents as the #1 intervention. And hearing Christina talk about trauma and becoming healers, the antidote to trauma is healthy, unconditional relationships, right? And so if we invest in our resource parents, foster parents, our relative caregivers, and even the bio family, that thought it can be scary for folks or seems really natural for other folks, the more people in that child's life that wants to love them, we should not be imposing any system barriers to that, right? You can have five sets of parents, and that's still a benefit for that child or that young person, right? And to hold that space and really kind of dismantle this system and rebuild it on what's best for that child or youth, based on their needs, not system needs, not the court needs, not everyone else's schedules needs. What does that young person need, right? So I think I would love to see QPI expanded, and then really just reframe that. We're in the work, the people that do this type of work are in the work of restoring childhoods. And that's important work, right? Because in certain settings, those childhoods are being robbed. And even to this day, we have system barriers that prevent more than they facilitate. So that would be my dream. So we'll go ahead and jump into our next question. This question's more of a reflective, as you are in this setting, as an adult, as a young professional. Now that you've had time to reflect and look back, how has your experiences negatively or positively impacted your adult life?
I think that my background and my experiences as a young person has developed me into someone who's very empathetic and understanding. I grew up in, even though I was in kinship, I grew up where everyone from my cousins to my aunties to my grandparents to my peers were foster youth, but none of us really understood that we were foster youth. So they were handing around this trauma as though it was candy, not even understanding that their past has contributed to their inability to care. I remember growing up with a brother as being 7 years apart, and we went on total different paths. He's currently incarcerated, and I became more empathetic because I understood that our experiences growing up was totally different. I was moved from LA at 9 and went to Yucca Valley, which is predominantly Caucasian. He stayed in LA and began to be recruited from different gangs. And as a person, as a young Black man, young Black boy growing up into a man, he was profiled and seen differently by police officers and all these different people. So his experiences as an older person who lost his mom and was able to know her, and as a younger person who lost their mom at 1 and wasn't really able to know her, I knew the only thing I knew was what was around me. And as for him, he knew something totally different, something that was taken from him. And so I think that my experiences as a young person have developed me to be empathetic and understanding that all our perspectives have yielded and shaped us into the person that we are, and that sometimes we're at a table and someone else's experience is totally different, and that is why they're contributing to this conversation or to these regulations or provisions differently than I am, because I come in with a different perspective. So I think that despite the trauma and the tragedies I experienced as a young person, without it and all those experiences, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And it has shaped me to be not only empathetic, but then also reasoning, understanding, and patient with others, because I do understand that not everyone is coming with the same state of mind, same experiences. So yeah.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, I think when I reflect back on how it's impacted positively or negatively impacted me as an adult, right, or my life in general, some things that come into mind are right after I transitioned out of care, I was trying to figure out what was a healthy relationship. What are healthy relationships? Because things that were so normal for me, whether that was the way folks talked to me or raising their voices, those things were always what I thought were healthy because they were my normal. And it was what I grew up around. It was what I found in my family when I went back home. And so it wasn't until years later and even today where I have been able to take a stand and say that's not healthy for me, and really defining and working through that and seeing what is healthy and not just what is my normal. And yeah, I think that was the biggest part, because it also contributed to my self-esteem, my confidence, and really knowing who I am as a person and putting myself around people who are going to encourage me and support me and empower me to grow, versus I think this is healthy and this is love. We don't give up on each other. We have to stay in this, and working through that.
Thank you, Zara.
Reflecting back through my experiences and now working on this field, something I look back is just that from the experiences that we face in the child welfare system, it didn't define us, but it gives us an opportunity to recognize these gaps and the importance of how the youth voice on addressing these gaps and being making the decision makers to these legislative and policies issues. Growing up, I didn't think going to college was even an opportunity. Life didn't look very positive due to my bios family's decisions. And I stayed in care until I aged out. And that was something that was very scary from, your whole life being dictated to what you can do, who you can see, to now you're on your own. You need to navigate these systems on your own. So you need to find these resources on your own. Through this, I was very lost on what to study, and also my siblings were still going through the same situations. Though I aged out, they were still dealing with the placement instability, being ripped away from their schools, always assimilating to a new home. And so I had to let them know that I was the individual, I was the loving person that didn't forget about them. Though the social workers will change, the foster homes will change, even the communities they might live in will change. I will always be their constant. Through it, I still see the same issues that I see to when I was 9 years old. a lot of lack of youth voice, lack of authentic youth engagement, and really seeing the needs of the courts or the counties versus what are the needs of the youth. That is something that I see very frequent, that was very common in my experience, that I do see with my siblings who are still living in the system to this day.
Thank you, Jordan. As I reflect on my experience in navigating adulthood, something that really stood out to me and something I struggled with was finding a positive identity and or creating that positive identity, both just as a woman, as a Latina. What does that look like? What does that mean? I wasn't raised with my culture in the same way, but I had such love and admiration, right? But I felt disconnected. I felt like I couldn't be consider myself as a Latina, right? So building an identity was definitely important for me to do and to figure out and navigate. And also appreciating the other pieces of my identity. And I see it in the young people we work with. What does that look like? What does that mean? And at CYC, I think we kind of help build a positive identity around the title foster youth, around that label, and we experience young people that's a shame, that's a mark, to be identified as a foster youth. And so unpacking that and rebuilding that is something that still we do on the daily. So for our final question, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. This team before you are amazing, and they all have such unique strengths for lots of reasons. They do this work. They have chosen to work in systems change and legislative change and regulatory change. So as a professional, as someone in the policy weeds, has your opinions or thoughts shifted at all? And can you share a little bit about your experience navigating the system from this vantage point?
Thank you, Vanessa. My working in the field, it has shifted my view of the system a lot. With my work through CARE, I had the opportunity to intern in Washington, D.C. in Congress when they were working on Family First. That was a great opportunity, but at the same time, very hypocritical of seeing the government when they're rolling out legislation of bringing families together, not causing separation, unnecessary placements of foster care, yet at the same time, there's family separation happening in borders and concentration camps of children. I see a lot of emphasis of continuing care reform. There's a huge legislation, but yeah, and the state having a new state general, Dr. Nadine Harris, which is really, really great. And things that our members are concerned is how is that going to look like in implementation? Because there's great legislation in the books, yet policy implementation looks very different. And really, foster care is really based on the experience on your zip code. Wherever you live, and the community is really going to determine what resources are available, what is your opportunities to higher education, or what is the social capital that's going to be available to you. And that is something that we need to change in the state. I know there's a lot of issues. The governor has rolled out their budget proposal, and there's a great opportunity in the state right now. There's a focus on childcare, education. We just want to make sure that there is an emphasis in the foster care population, because we are really behind in educational progress, as well as a high rate of instability and placement.
Yeah, so I think thinking about our youth, some of my thoughts that I've had from experience and now working with youth today in this capacity, I always remind myself from firsthand experience, but also just out loud, that foster youth, right, who are in care, them being in the foster care system, that's where they are in their life, right? But that's not who they are. There's so much more to them. There's their identity. They're beyond the foster care system. And there's so many pieces of them that's just one piece. And if we go ahead and put them in this box, that's all they are, then there's going to be a lot of unpacking that they're going to have to do later on in life, with or without our help, right? And so really working with them and understanding that there's so much more to their identity, and how do we support them from a strength-based approach and give them unconditional love and even tough love sometimes, but understanding that that's just where they're at in their life. That doesn't mean that's where they're going to be at for the next 20 years, the next 30 years, and they're never going to forget our faces and the way that we interact with them. So how do we support them for growth in their life, and understanding that that is the place that they're at in their life. That is not all of their identity.
Thank you, Zara.
You know, reflecting back, which is only like 7 months ago when I was not in this role, but just reflecting even more back to, you know, when I was in high school, or even when I was in college, and my whole perception of the system was that there wasn't people who cared, there wasn't people who were trying, they didn't really want to hear our voices. I think that my opinion of that has definitely shifted, being able to work with child welfare professionals and in my profession. There's from my opinion, there's so many people who care. There's so many people who want to change the system. But I think that what has became apparent to me is just the culture of the system. When you're in a culture, you begin to adapt to it. And that doesn't mean that your belief system, that doesn't mean your understanding, your wants has shifted, but just the culture and the language that you are surrounded by, you become immersed into. And so I think that my love and my empathy for child welfare providers has increased. Knowing how many steps you have to take in order to get to the front door, or how many steps you have to take in order to achieve implementation is a lot. And from the outside looking in, it seems so easy to just be like, oh, all you got to do is this, all you got to do is that. But when you become a part and you get to see like all of the moving pieces, you become more empathetic and understanding to why these pieces aren't moving like you would want them to move. Because as a youth, what the one thing you want is for your issues or your problems or things that are enabling you or barriers that you're facing to be eradicated or fixed right then and at that moment, because you're going through it and you're dealing with it and you're having the trauma and experiences from it. And so even working with a lot of our youth, they're in that place where they want help. They're going through homelessness, going through displacements, going through trauma, going through having issues at college and not being able to access their funds or whatever the case may be. And at that moment, the system looks like they don't want to help or support, but there's just so many moving pieces to it. So I think that as a professional in this field, that I have more of a empathetic lens and understanding.
Thanks, Christina. And I'll end on this note. The system is both incredibly complex and bureaucratic in certain parts of the state, and it's very simple what children and young people need. And there's many ways to have a positive impact. So whether it's through mentorship, supporting organizations like ours, or becoming a CASA, or supporting people that do the work, those positive impacts are things that I myself and the members I work with really remember, is that one time we were able to be there for them with no questions asked. I think one of the highlights of our job, and one of my favorite parts, is the amount of letters of recommendations and references I become. And in some cases, I've only worked with them once or twice. And they're like, Vanessa, will you be my reference? And I'm like, absolutely. Give them everything, give them my personal number, everything, whatever you need. And so we get to be that person for a lot of our members. And even that small action conveys so much. So while it's very complex, it's really simple at the same time. They just, our young people just want someone to be there, someone in their corner, someone in their squad, right? So at the same time, it's very, very simple. And I think that's what gives me the most hope. So thank you all, my amazing team. And we have a few moments for Q&A or discussion or dialogue if folks want to join us.
Really fast, we had Maya Downs on the webinar write in, "This is powerful!" exclamation point. Thank you all for sharing your experiences and advice.
Thank you.
If anyone else had any questions, we want to use the microphones just so people on webinar can hear.
Thanks you guys for sharing your experience. Like, you didn't have to, but you did. So honestly, thank you. So I'm someone who's worked in foster care. I worked in group homes, strips, or RBS programs, and also the administrative foster care program with Sacramento County. And, you know, looking back on it, I'm curious to know your thoughts or your suggestions of just like staffing for foster care. When I worked at the foster care group homes, I worked in, you know, the RBS programs or the AB12 programs. And I was like 21, 22, working with people who are my age, you know, like looking back, that's not effective for, you know, foster youth or, you know, working with the county administering this program. Like you said, people sometimes see it as a paycheck, you know, you see advertising, it's disgusting. So, you know, my question to you is how do you, or what is your advice to get more authentic care, more trauma action care? Because, you know, you look at the daycare, you have to go through all these hoops and bounds, but I was placed in homes to take care of toddlers. I'm 22, like what am I gonna do? So I'm just curious to know what your guys' thoughts are to have better, authentic and stable care for kids.
Well, I do want to say that in my opinion, age is not a reflection of expertise and ability to be there and to support. I think that in a lot of cases that a lot of our youth, they need peer support and people who are around their age to look at them and be like, oh, you're helping me and you're so close to me. I'm going to listen to you more than I'm going to listen to the 40-year-old who's talking to me. But what I will say, when I was thinking about when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I was going to work for a group home, and just talking to so many different people. I was never placed in a group home, but I have siblings who were. And I think that one of the things is that there needs to be a college degree associated with it. It needs to be intentional about staffing people with lived experience, staffing people who have degrees in different levels of social work and child care and so many different forms to give the youth all the resources and abilities from their staff that they can. And I think also we just like the said of shifting the culture. When thinking about youth who are in STRTPs or in group homes or whatever the case, they're labeled as a problem child, as someone has issues, as someone who is problematic, so you begin to look at that child as so and conduct yourself into working with them as such, right? And so I think that I have to be intentional about shifting that culture in just even the orientation process of these youth, these children who are here are not problems. They have experienced trauma, and we as a staff are supposed to be here and provide them all the resources and support to help them heal from their trauma. And so I think once we begin to have staff who are more educated, have more experience, and then also be intentional about shifting that culture is when we have better outcomes.
Thank you for that question. I think it was only 5 years ago that we raised the age of staff that are working at group homes from 18 to 21. And that was a recommendation that came out of a CYC member. They're like, I just look at an 18-year-old and look and wonder, like, how are you going to help me? I'm experiencing so much pain. So that was a recent change. And it was an interesting conversation because they thought it might be discrimination in some form. And then the winning argument at the end was to become an airplane pilot, you have to be a certain age. And so we could apply that standard here. And so it went through the legislative process really easily, and people thought to themselves, like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And to echo some of Christina's points, there's really great training out there, right? If we can go to a positive youth development frame, that's already helpful. If we can go to I love what you said, trauma action. Yeah, it was good. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna write that down. So those slight shifts, right? Those 20-degree shifts, if everyone did that, that could transform that group home or that setting, right? So there's definitely a ton of really cool trainings out there that I think could be helpful. And that's really something that's important to talk about. Thank you.
So just my question is there anything that could have prevented you guys with your families, that the supportive services or anything different that you felt you could have prevented from entering the CPS system that you wish you would have had now that would be great? And then the other question is, it seems like all you guys had biological siblings, and growing in the system, you know, to be raised together with your biological siblings isn't always going to happen, unfortunately. So what do you recommend, or what would you wish, you know, if you had your magic wand, when maybe to try to preserve the sibling contact? Because I would imagine it kind of, you guys really close, and then you come into CPS, the trauma's there, and then you kind of, the sibling, the closeness is kind of broken up when you're not placed together, or, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic. I would say that's something that CYC has worked on. It's probably like one of our legacy topics. We've ran at least 5 bills over the last 30 years, all about maintaining sibling relationships. So even 4 years ago, when CCR was moving through and everyone's talking about closed group homes, and there was a lot of energy around that, the bill we were running was about maintaining sibling relationships through the adoption system. So that continues to be a top priority for us. And how can we create the system where siblings are not separated? Like, how do we just say, this is a line we will never cross, and we recalculate every other factor in that equation except for that line, right? That's a question we should ask systematically. As far as prevention or entering care, does any of my colleagues want to chime in there?
Yeah, so there was a lot of need and help that was needed for my family before we went to the care. However, like, you know, DCFS was viewed as an entity that separated families, that was like, you know, incarceration, going straight to jail. My, like, instance for my mother, you know, she was struggling a lot, whether it was domestic violence, substance abuse. However, it was a fear to go to DCFS because, due to our undocumented status, it was afraid of, I'm going to be deported. Then where's going to be the future for my kids? So there was a lot of fear on that, and that hence us not going, not being placed in school, and that was a huge barrier. That was one thing, and also how much power the DCFS had on my connections with my siblings. To this day is very difficult, because there is a lot of inconsistencies of what is the best needs for my siblings or for the youth. If the county social worker doesn't agree with the FFA, and the FFA doesn't agree with family council, and family council doesn't agree with the attorney, it's like there's many instances that I'm running around to pretty much ask the blessing of all these entities to continue having a relationship with my siblings. So that is something that is very hard, that you know, that we shouldn't be having. It should be common sense that, you know, I want to spend more time with my siblings. However, if my sister is labeled as a troubled child, or has considerable behaviors, or has been placed in a 14-day notice, there's additional walls that we're going to go up for me to continue having a healthy relationship.
There was a go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say really quickly, when I think about it, I think when I was reunified with my mother, she had got out of prison, and for her experience, even when I look back on it, it was about making sure she checked the boxes from her, so she was in good standing with her probation officer. But there wasn't enough conversations, training, support groups around preparing her for what life was going to be like after prison, what it was going to be like for her to go into this mother role of 8 children that she had been away from for a period of time, who had already experienced trauma from some of the decisions that she had made, but also then also in care, right? And us being separated in different towns and things like that. So she wasn't prepared for that. She tried the best she could. You know, there was this level of like high of like, I just got out of prison, I'm going to be a better mom. And that lasted for a few years, but then the things that she wasn't able to address or get support around ended up coming right back around and had that relapse, right? And so when I think about things that could have been changed or could have been different, is really thinking about when we have individuals who are getting out of incarceration, like how are we preparing them and supporting them for parenthood? How are we preparing them and supporting them to get out of the, and it's very difficult, but to get out of the system mentality of being in prison, right? To now being a parent and being at home and getting meals ready and getting homework ready and things like that. And how do you respond to your pressures and stress, right? And so it's not just a checkbox of, let me make sure I'm good with my probation officer so they don't take my kids away.
Thank you, Zara.
There was a webinar question from Veronica Whitaker, asked, would you be willing to be a foster parent? Maybe why or why not?
Yes, I can't wait. I'm so excited. No, personally, I had a lot of friends and fellow CYC folks that wanted to be social workers, and I have a lot of love and respect for folks that have their MSW and do the work. That's just not something I could personally do. Make decisions for someone else's life is not, within my my capacity or brainwidth. But fostering and adopting one day is absolutely a dream. Something that I'm really excited to pursue pretty soon here.
Absolutely. The question brought tears to my eyes a little bit because it's something that makes me super excited when I think about it. But it's also a thing where I say I will do it. I will consider fostering an adoption when I'm ready to have children. When I have my household, when I have this set up where I can have children of my own, and then I can take them in and they're going to be my children. And so this idea that when I'm ready for kids, then absolutely, because then that is the point where I will have children.
Yes, and that's something that I always have to consider. Being separated from my siblings, all my siblings had different experiences growing up in the foster care system. And one, I remember when my brother was being labeled very negatively, his case plan, he had to end up moving to a group home. And I saw a lot more trauma they was facing, a lot of isolation, and growing up to this day, him being an adult, how a lot of that caused his development. And always a fear that my younger siblings, my sisters specifically, that they will be placed in a group home. So my sisters are still going through placement changes. Just to be frank, they're going through a placement change right now, and that's something that I have to question. Like, if they talk about putting my siblings in a group home, I am going to be stepping in to take care of them, because I could see the other options could be a lot more detrimental that the system has in place.
Yeah, I would definitely be open to adoption or fostering. I only have one biological brother, but I have 3 adopted brothers and adopted sister. And I remember they were 13. Well, I was 13 when they were going through the process of adoption. And I remember the social worker telling my auntie and uncle, who I consider my mom and dad, to not adopt the oldest boy because he was problematic. And my uncle's like, I'm not about to split up. We're at first only going to adopt the girl, but when they found out that they had siblings, they're like, we'll take them all. And to see the stigma that was put on my brother because he was put into so many different group homes and considered a problem child, and how they were trying to block his blessing in a sense. I would love to adopt children, and regardless of if it's a 5, they come with 5, they come with 10, I'm taking them all.
All right, we're aware of the time. Thank you all for joining us, and we have to jet to a next meeting, but we can definitely leave behind our information if you want to connect further. We're actually housed here on the 3rd floor, so yeah, hopefully we see you around. Thank you.
Thank you again.